Intelligence has never been a reliable shield against financial mistakes, and history quietly demonstrates this uncomfortable truth with remarkable consistency. Every economic cycle leaves behind stories of engineers who designed complex machines, yet misjudged simple investments, surgeons who mastered human anatomy while accumulating unmanageable debt, and experienced executives who confidently bought into bubbles that seemed impossible to burst. The common explanation is usually a lack of financial education, but that only scratches the surface. A far more interesting possibility is that many costly financial decisions emerge not from ignorance, but from the way the human mind naturally processes uncertainty, reward, and social belonging. By the end of this video, the question may no longer be why intelligent people make financial mistakes, but whether the human brain was ever designed to navigate modern economic systems in the first place. Money appears objective because it is measured with numbers, balances, percentages, and contracts. Yet almost every financial decision begins long before any calculation is made. It begins with emotion. Before spreadsheets are opened, before investments are compared, and before budgets are written, the brain quietly evaluates safety, status, fear, comfort, and identity. Those emotional signals often arrive milliseconds before logical reasoning, shaping conclusions that later feel completely rational. People rarely say they bought an expensive car because they feared falling behind their peers, or invested during a market frenzy because everyone around them seemed optimistic. Instead, they create explanations that sound analytical, even though the emotional decision had already been made beneath conscious awareness. This hidden sequence creates one of the greatest illusions in personal finance. We often believe that reasoning produces our financial choices, when in many situations, reasoning simply defends decisions that emotion has already approved. Modern neuroscience repeatedly suggests that much of conscious thought behaves like a skilled lawyer rather than an impartial judge, constructing convincing arguments for conclusions that originated elsewhere. In financial life, this tendency quietly compounds over decades. Consider a simple purchase. Imagine someone deciding whether to spend $1,000 on a luxury item. The mathematical question is straightforward. What alternatives exist for that money? What future value might it create if invested? What additional obligations accompany ownership? Yet the mind rarely begins there. Instead, it asks invisible questions. Will this improve how others perceive me? Will I regret not buying it? Does owning this make me feel more successful? Only afterward does logic arrive to justify whichever emotional answer feels most satisfying. This becomes even more powerful because the brain evolved in environments that looked nothing like today's financial world. For most of human history, survival depended on responding quickly to immediate threats and opportunities rather than carefully optimizing outcomes decades into the future. Food that appeared today was more valuable than food promised next year. Social approval increased survival. Belonging to the group mattered more than maximizing abstract future wealth. These instincts served humanity remarkably well for thousands of years. Yet they now operate inside economies built around retirement accounts, compound interest, inflation, leverage, digital payments, and markets that move faster than any human nervous system evolved to comprehend. The result is a persistent mismatch between ancient psychology and modern finance. Our instincts prioritize certainty over probability, immediate rewards over delayed benefits, familiar stories over statistical evidence, and visible success over invisible stability. None of these tendencies automatically produce disaster, but together they create conditions where intelligent people repeatedly underestimate risks that mathematics clearly describes. One of the clearest examples appears in compound growth. Most people understand the formula intellectually. A modest return sustained over decades often exceeds dramatic gains earned briefly. Yet emotionally, slow progress feels almost indistinguishable from standing still. Imagine two investors. One earns steady annual returns over 30 years. Another experiences spectacular gains followed by equally dramatic losses. The second investor enjoys exciting stories and moments of celebration, while the first experiences long periods where nothing particularly interesting seems to happen. Ironically, the less entertaining journey frequently produces the more stable outcome because compounding rewards consistency rather than excitement. The mathematics are surprisingly simple. Suppose one portfolio grows by 7% annually for 30 years. Ignoring taxes and fees for simplicity, $1 becomes roughly $7.50. Increase that time horizon to 40 years, and the result approaches $15. The remarkable feature is not the percentage itself, but the accelerating effect of time. Much of the final value appears during the later years, meaning patience contributes almost as much as the return itself. Unfortunately, patience rarely produces the emotional satisfaction our brains naturally seek. Behavioral economists have repeatedly observed that losing $100 generally feels more painful than gaining $100 feels rewarding. The numbers are identical, yet the emotional weight is dramatically different. This imbalance quietly influences investment behavior, spending habits, negotiations, and even career choices. People sometimes refuse beneficial opportunities simply because the possibility of temporary loss feels unbearable, even when long-term probabilities strongly favor action. Markets occasionally amplify these instincts into collective behavior. During periods of optimism, rising prices become social proof that more rising prices must follow. Headlines grow increasingly confident, conversations become more enthusiastic, and skepticism begins to feel irrational. Each participant observes everyone else's confidence and mistakes it for evidence. The cycle feeds itself until expectations drift far beyond underlying reality. Then, when confidence eventually weakens, the process reverses with astonishing speed. Fear spreads through the same social channels that previously transmitted optimism, creating the impression that danger has suddenly appeared when, in reality, much of the underlying risk had accumulated quietly over many years. This pattern has repeated throughout financial history in different forms, across different countries, technologies, and generations. The specific assets change. Sometimes it is land, sometimes company shares, sometimes housing, sometimes entirely new technologies. The psychological engine remains surprisingly familiar because the participants remain human. Another subtle trap emerges from lifestyle adaptation. Income increases often create the expectation that spending should increase at the same pace. Promotions lead to larger homes, newer vehicles, more subscriptions, more obligations, and higher recurring costs. Each individual decision appears reasonable in isolation, yet together, they transform flexibility into dependency. The individual may technically earn more money than ever before, while simultaneously becoming less financially resilient, because fixed commitments quietly consume future choices. This is where mathematics and psychology intersect in unexpected ways. Financial resilience is not determined solely by income. It is shaped by the relationship between income, expenses, flexibility, uncertainty, and time. Two people earning identical salaries can occupy completely different financial realities depending on how much optionality remains after recurring obligations are satisfied. Freedom often hides inside margins that appear insignificant until unexpected events reveal their importance. Scarcity introduces another psychological distortion. When financial pressure becomes constant, the brain naturally shifts attention toward immediate problems. Bills due this week feel infinitely more important than opportunities 5 years away. This response is understandable and often necessary for survival, but prolonged scarcity consumes mental bandwidth that would otherwise support planning, creativity, and strategic thinking. Under sustained pressure, even highly capable individuals may appear irrational because their cognitive resources are being continuously redirected toward urgent concerns. Modern financial systems unintentionally exploit many of these tendencies. One-click purchasing reduces the emotional friction associated with spending. Monthly payment structures emphasize affordability today rather than total cost tomorrow. Notifications encourage immediate reactions. Constant financial news transforms ordinary market fluctuations into emotional experiences. None of these mechanisms independently determine behavior, but together, they create an environment where instinct frequently outruns careful reflection. Perhaps the most surprising realization is that intelligence itself can occasionally increase vulnerability. Highly intelligent individuals often construct more sophisticated explanations for emotionally driven decisions. Confidence in one's reasoning may reduce the likelihood of questioning hidden assumptions. In that sense, Intelligence becomes most valuable when paired with humility, because recognizing the limits of one's judgment creates room for better decisions. The most resilient financial habits often appear almost boring. Delayed gratification, consistent saving, careful diversification, gradual learning, thoughtful budgeting. None of these generate dramatic stories, yet their quiet repetition gradually shifts probability in favorable directions. They work not because they eliminate uncertainty, but because they reduce dependence on perfect predictions. Over time, the central question changes. Instead of asking which investment will produce the highest return, people begin asking which habits reduce the number of costly psychological mistakes they are likely to make. That subtle shift transforms finance from a game of prediction into a discipline of self-awareness. The hidden pattern running beneath nearly every expensive financial mistake is not a lack of intelligence, nor a shortage of information, but the quiet interaction between an ancient brain and an increasingly complex economic system. Numbers may describe markets, but psychology often determines how those numbers are interpreted. Long before wealth is gained or lost, the mind has already begun negotiating with itself, balancing fear against hope, certainty against possibility, and identity against evidence. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is that the greatest financial risk is rarely the crisis everyone sees approaching. It is the invisible mental shortcut that feels so reasonable in the moment that it escapes notice entirely, quietly shaping one decision after another until, years later, the mathematics simply reveal what psychology had been writing all along.